Blessings, everybody. I hope you're doing well wherever you may find yourselves. I'm Dane, host of the channel. Today is an episode in my playlist called Music Musings, and here I am to discuss what exactly is the new wave of British heavy metal, and because it's been given that term, what is the first wave of British heavy metal? So let's go ahead and dive right in. Here I have this compilation. This is pretty marvelous. It's not legendary or the greatest thing since sliced bread when it comes to music, but this is a fabulous microcosm of the new wave of British heavy metal. It's called 79 Revisited. I don't think you can get this anymore. As you can see, at the center you have the drummer Thunderstick from the band Samson, and my sister gave me this when I was in high school when she worked at a record store in New Orleans East called Record Bar. And it has Diamond Head, Sweet Savage, Saxon, White Spirit, Raven, Parallax, Def Leppard, Get Your Rocks Off, Weapon, Samson, Vice Versa is my favorite song by them. It's on here. Hollow Ground, Girl School, Witch Find, Iron Maiden, the song Sanctuary, Jaguar, Tigers of Pang Tang, the song Killers, Gaskin, Sledgehammer, Venom, the song is Angel Dust, Angel Witch, Extermination Days, the song Trespass, Holocaust, Vardis, Blitzkrieg is the song, and then Helpless by Diamond Head. Then the bonus tracks are Dragster, A to Z, Witchfinder General, the band song Witchfinder General, Black Axe, Fist, and Praying Mantis. This came out on Metal Blade Records sometime in the 80s. Out of print, I do believe. You get a nice little booklet. Let me know in the comments if you have this. And then you get, just the typical song credits and stuff. I wish they would reissue all the Metal Massacre stuff, but that's probably a dream that will never be achieved at this point. So anyway, what is the new wave of British heavy metal? Well, it was first coined in 1979 by a writer in Sounds magazine, a British magazine. And most people will agree that the new wave of British heavy metal officially begins in 1979 and then ends in 85. Some will argue in 83 because that's when it is in the decline. I'm more to agree with, say, the latter half of 83, maybe the beginnings of 1984. Anyway, and then the underground movement, when this is going behind the scenes, began in 75, so the mid-70s and 78. And I'm going to argue with most critics, although I don't consider myself a critic, that it truly begins officially in 1979, hence the CD here, 1979 Revisited. And so people want to lump Judas Priest, and some even want to lump UFO and Thin Lizzy as in the new wave of British heavy metal. The problem with that is, with all three bands, Thin Lizzy, UFO, and Judas Priest, is that they're already successful when 79 rolls around. So, and Judas Priest's Rock-A-Rolla comes out in 1974, so that even predates the underground movement of the new wave of British heavy metal. Some people want to include Motorhead, while that is in the underground. Well, what I mean is Motorhead's first album, Motorhead, comes out in 77, and that is part of the underground movement. People are It's in the mainstream, or it's very close to being in the mainstream, because Lemmy leaving Hawkwind and all that, and Motorhead coming out in 1977. It is not part of the official wave 1979 to 1981. So when people include Motorhead in the new wave of British heavy metal, I kind of cringe a little bit, and you'll see where I'm going with that. So once again, if you don't have this, if you can find this used, this is so worth having, since it's a great microcosm of the most well-known bands of the new wave of British heavy metal. Now, what exactly do we mean by new wave of British heavy metal? Well, I think because people have argued over the years, is it a genre, is it a movement? Well, if you think of the word wave, I think that's the appropriate word, because it's not a genre, and it can't be a genre, because all the bands that I listed, and there's thousands of new wave of British heavy metal bands. If you look at Martin Popoff's books on those. There's tons. They're very obscure. There's some really obscure ones. There's some very famous and bands that become mainstream, like Iron Maiden, what have you, Diamond Head, right? But it can't be a genre because there's too many different stylings. There's too many variants. If you look at Venom as an example, as a new wave of British heavy metal band, okay, they're part of that wave, but they have a punk metal sensibility, or a little bit of both, and and they're so different from, say, Def Leppard. They're so different from, let's see who's on the list. They're so different from Praying Mantis. Praying Mantis has more melodic lendings, much more melodic lendings for much of the work compared to, say, Venom. So anyway, you can lump... Saxon is kind of a motorcycle type, motorcycle metal, motorcycle rock, motorcycle hard rock, leagues apart from Venom as another example. So they don't even fit in with Iron Maiden. So just there's too many variations. There's no one there's no consistency with respect to the elements that make up new wave of British heavy metal. There's just too many different flavors, if you will, and we'll leave it at that. And it can't be a movement either, because movement would mean isms or ideologies. So if you take punk, for example, punk has a certain aesthetic, a certain ideology. This is what we believe in. Think of the Romantic period of British literature, where their ideology was going against the previous age, the neoclassical era, where which the neoclassical era stretched the importance of logic and reason, the Age of Enlightenment, where the Romantics say, no, that's fine and good, but the imagination is just as important, or for them, more important than logic and reason. So emotion, sentiment, that kind of thing. So you don't have, this notion of a consistent, all these bands having the same ideology or ism. So so wave is the perfect way to go, because it's an influx of new talent coming in that's grabbing everyone's attention, especially at the beginning of 1979. So this new wave comes in because of punk rock, or one of the reasons, coincidentally or not. Punk rock is declining in the mid-70s, and new wave music is on the upswing, and there are bands who want to, continue this hard flavored type of rock music, and they don't want to do new wave, and they don't want to do post-punk. They certainly don't want to do punk. So they don't want to adapt to the situation. They want to continue in the vein that they know and love, the music that is part and parcel of their DNA. So that is, in essence, what the new wave of British heavy metal is. It is not a genre. It is not a movement. It is simply a wave. That's the perfect word, I believe. Now, here is wherein lies the problem. If you do a Google search, and I've been asking myself this for years, okay, if this is the new wave of British heavy metal, and it's called that, then what on earth was the first wave? See, if it's new, there has to be an old. What was the old wave of British heavy metal, or the first wave of British heavy metal? So if you do a Google search, you simply get, and I'll read this word for word. Let me just pull it up. You Google search, the first thing you get is, the United Kingdom was a cradle of the first wave of heavy metal, which was born at the end of the 1960s and flowered in the early 70s. Of the many British bands that came to prominence during the period, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple achieved worldwide success and critical acclaim. All right, Black Sabbath makes sense. I'm definitely going to throw in Black Sabbath as part of the first or old wave of British heavy metal. I don't include Led Zeppelin, and I don't include Deep Purple in that. In rock has a heaviness to it. I've talked about that before. So does Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin is still very heavy blues-based music. It is not heavy metal. Yeah, if you read Hammer of the Gods, and Mark Davis talks about kids banging their heads when they launch live into Communication Breakdown, it's more of a proto-metal, and Deep Purple proto-metal as well. It's not quite metal. And if you're going to throw in Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, you might as well throw in Uriah Heep. But they're still proto-metal as well, along with Blue Cheer and Iron Butterfly and some of those 60 bands. Sir Lord Baltimore. There's quite a bit of those. Bullet, which then becomes Hard Stuff because of the lawsuit. Dust, all these wonderful or close to wonderful bands. Some of them are absolutely amazing and wonderful, like Zeppelin and Sabbath and Purple and Uriah Heep. So I will give you Black Sabbath. I will argue that the first wave of British heavy metal is Black Sabbath, is Motorhead, and is Judas Priest, because they are before 1979. Black Sabbath, early 70s with that debut. Motorhead first, as I said, 1977. Judas Priest first album, 1974. But see, the problem with Rock-A-Rolla is that it's still bluesy-based rock. Sad Wings of Destiny, now we're talking a little bit closer to that metal shtick, if you will. Judas Priest, I would argue, with Sad Wings of Destiny, is much heavier in places than Led Zeppelin 1 and 2. But Black Sabbath is where it's at. Even Mark Pot, with respect to heavy metal being obvious, Black Sabbath, Martin Popoff in one of his books has said, is the first heavy metal band. They're an interesting band because they're both the first heavy metal band, but they're also part of the proto-metal scene, if you will, if that makes sense. So, again, I don't think there really is a huge number of bands who qualify as the first wave or the old wave of British heavy metal. Because, again, Led Zeppelin, I don't think, is heavy enough. They're heavy, but not metal. Black Sabbath is heavy and metal. Deep Purple is heavy, but not metal. Uriah Heep is heavy, but not metal. Motorhead, even Lemmy has gone on record saying we're not a heavy metal band, we're just a rock band or a hard rock band. And then Judas Priest is even questionable because of Rock-A-Rolla. And then even Sad Wings of Destiny has some moments on it that are not heavy enough, like Epitaph and some other stuff. We get to Dissident Aggressor on the third album. Now, that's Judas Priest really becoming metal. If you want to get down to it, I would say Judas Priest really doesn't become a heavy metal band until Screaming for Vengeance. There's some metal stuff on British Steel, but the whole album is not metal. There's some proto-metal on Hellbent for Leather or Killing Machine, still not really full-blown metal. And it's just an opinion. I'm not saying you have to agree with me. But so overall, the new wave of British heavy metal is a wave. It's not a movement. It's not a genre. And I'm not the first person to say that. And then as far as what is the first or the old wave of British heavy metal? Well, if you had to put my feet to the fire, I would say there isn't much of a first wave of British heavy metal because the only band that really fits the mold is Black Sabbath. And then Judas Priest and Motorhead are questionable. Anyway, tell me what you think in the comments, and if you're so inclined, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Take care now. God bless. Bye.